Hello and welcome to Following On County Cricketer. I'm Jon Norman, alongside, as ever, George Dobell and Nick Friend from The Cricketer, and also double county championship winner Steve Harmison, who wasn't actually with us last week. Lots to talk about, the blast, as well as the county changes, which we have talked about at length. But I mean, if this show doesn't talk about them at length, then what show will? Let's find out what's occurred since we were last in discussion. I think, George, if I can bring you in, there was a feeling that there would be an agreement within a day or two about the direction of travel in terms of the three options on the table. I'm not saying that they would have been agreed by now, but if I'm right, last week we were recording on the Monday or Tuesday, and there was a feeling that by the Wednesday or Thursday, the three options would have been agreed upon, and off we go. But then there was reports in the Cricketer that excuse me, hit us a slight a block in the road. But here we are, a week on. Are we any closer to seeing some form of idea?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it only took another 48 hours or so, something like that, to get to the agreed shortlist. And I think as we speak, we're on Tuesday afternoon. I think the counties have started having their meetings in groups of three to nail down what they agree. And the late change was that the 14 game championship season came back in as a possibility, which is Surrey's idea and had previously pretty much been negated, but it's definitely a possibility again now. Surrey probably are more positive about it than some other clubs. I think it only would see in their model, Nick will remind me, only 4 days actual reduction in cricket because they would go for 10 T20 games. I think other clubs would be reluctant to see that big a cut. So I'm not sure that will get through still, but anyway, that is one of the options. So the three options, just quickly, is a Bob Willis Trophy rip-off, basically, encore, if you prefer. There's something very similar to what we get now with potentially 8 teams in the first division, but God knows how many they'll end up agreeing with. And there's a hybrid, which we talked about last week, which is a top division of 12 split between 2 groups. Anyway, so that has promotion, relegation, and conferences. That's why I call it the hybrid. Which it will be, don't know. Don't think it'll be the Bob Willis Trophy. Don't think it'll be 14 games. So, because part of the reason for the conversation in the first place was to cut the amount of cricket. Now, I would love them not to, but I think they'll find it quite hard to have gone down this route and then not make any more cuts. But anyway, that's where we are. They're talking about it as counties now. They will go back to the professional game committee at the start of July and hopefully come with a recommendation to the ECB board from there by mid-July. So yeah, I still think it's possible that we're on target for a decision within the month.
Why is it that Surrey are most keen to continue the county championship at 14 games a season, and some of the other counties less so?
Well, they can afford to. For one thing, they've got a large membership, and I think a lot of clubs feel the need to have that 14 game option on the list to appease their members. I definitely think there's some lip service to saying, well, we're fighting for 14 games when they don't really want it. Surrey, to be fair, might want it, but Surrey can cope pretty easily with the cut to 10 blast games.
Surrey have also got a big squad. A lot of the actually on all sides, like they're set up for a 14 game championship. Their attendances this season have broken 21st century records. They made red ball cricket work commercially for them, and they've got a squad that's essentially designed to, because of the resource they've got, to cope with the rigors of it in a way that means that players can be rested and rotated and all those things, and therefore a lot of those players probably want 14 games as well because those bowlers playing 8 or 9 games, for example, deliberately.
To be fair, I've just given you quite pragmatic answers. To be fair to Surrey, they have stood up for the county game actually for a decade or more, probably far more. So it might also be that they really want the best. Actually, No, it definitely is that they really want the best competitions in their view possible. And of course, if you had an 8-team top division, you be playing 7 teams home and away. There is some nice symmetry about that. There is some integrity to it.
And just another thing to say for Surrey on that is that they've obviously won the last 3 championships, but they have also won the last 3 championships while consistently saying it's ridiculous that we're not playing our closest rivals twice.
Yeah.
They've never shied away from the fact that while they are while they have at times, in inverted commas, benefited from that. I think there was a year when they didn't play Hampshire twice, here when they didn't play Essex twice. They're not for that. They've always said, Rory Burns consistently has said, we want to be playing these guys twice. Not a sour taste, but it does leave it slightly unfinished, doesn't it? So,
Yeah.
On a sporting level, from the club who are, best set, ultimately, if you had 18 clubs who were set up like Surrey, you wouldn't be talking about you probably wouldn't be talking about reducing stuff in the first place, would you? Because either commercially and also in terms of sort of player.
No, but the problem is with the non-100 host counties still are reliant, whatever the problems with the blast, still are reliant on the money that competition brings in. And to lose one home game and have mitigation for that from a better schedule is maybe okay. To lose 2, starting to get uncomfortable. So I don't know that they'll get that through. I think it will be a popular suggestion for a lot of county supporters. But we'll see. Anyway, those are the options as we understand them, and they're talking about them now.
Less cricket, and we've heard from various sources that a lot of the players want less cricket. Doesn't that?
Do they want less cricket? Just to be fair to them, they just want a better schedule.
They just want, yeah, So I've banged this drum for 2 years and written far too many words on it over the course, but the incorrect stick to beat the players with is that they want to play less for more, for the same money and all that stuff. And that's cheap and churlish and not fair on them. The reality is they want a safer schedule, and safe as being the word used both mentally and physically. Even this blast block, there have been fewer games played on back-to-back days, but on those back-to-back day games, we've seen plenty of players going down with precisely the injuries that players have predicted would happen with this schedule. They finish the blast block on Friday and then go straight into 2 rounds of championship games, not just championship games, but 2 rounds of Kookaburra championship games, when we'll see players by more overs, be in the field for longer, increase the chance of injuries, all those things that players, and they're not saying we don't want to play cricket. They're saying we think there should be 3 days between championship games, which feels a fairly sense, which by the way already exists in Australia as minimum standard. And they don't want to be playing blast games on consecutive days, which once again, if you take Australia as a model, you don't have players playing blast games Big Bash games on consecutive days. I think a lot of players would be in support of a 12 and 12 drop off, because you would lose effectively 10 days of cricket, but more importantly, you lose the days either side. So you'd actually create 2.5, 3 new weeks in the schedule, basically to drop into the schedule, not to put another comp on top of. But so maybe for a start, you don't have to start the season on April 3rd. You could start on April 10th, which is on one of the sample schedules I've seen what they would do. So you lose the lottery of the weather for that first week of April, which has been an issue, not this year, but in previous years. And you could also, with those 2 weeks, mean that no one is playing on back-to-back nights in the blast. And as George says, if the mitigation for 6 home games is better scheduling, essentially on Fridays and Sundays and Thursdays and Saturdays, if teams make those their preferences, then you can plot the blast in a way that makes much more commercial sense, makes money for the counties, while also protecting the players and mean they don't have to play as Durham did earlier this season, Saturday night at Edgbaston and then Sunday afternoon at Durham, which no elite sporting competition would think is sensible in cricket or outside. So that's what players are asking for, something that makes sense for their bodies, so that you have players still in the park by September.
Although didn't England and West Indies do almost exactly that?
Yeah, that's ludicrous, right?
They did Durham to Bristol.
Yeah, and it's
with
like
a
that's
7-hour coach journey. I mean, this is all going to be wearingly familiar to Harmy, because that's probably spent half his life.
And can I say the one thing I'd say, because one of the counter arguments for all this is, this has always been the way.
It hasn't though.
No, but no,
there's a chunk of there's a month of the season.
But
That's not
there's
there.
always, what I mean is the schedule has always been busier. You know, you can speak to players in the 80s and 90s or whatever, it will tell you stories about finishing a game on, you know, at 6 p.m. on this day and then playing at 11 a.m. the next day. It doesn't mean it was right then, and it doesn't mean it has been right for the last few years. And as you say, the elephant in the room is August because effectively you can only have an 8-day, like there are 4 home games, essentially 8 days of cricket in August in county cricket because of where the 100 lies and whatnot, and the fact that you kind of have to play the one-day cup underneath. And I think the one thing George and I are both certain on is the absolute certainty from what happens to the schedule going into next year is that the one-day cup will be played in August, not the start of April, as we mooted a couple of times a couple of months ago. That is the one thing that we do know. There's no real appetite tangibly to move that away from where it currently is, mainly because you can't put anything else under it.
Harmy, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the schedule's always been hectic. You know, I'm a little bit more of a sort of traditionalist. I like home and away. I like the 2 divisions. The 16 model that we had. I mean, the 16 model that we had was, you know, came in '99. We won with the best team in the world in 2005.
It's not a coincidence.
Then we were the best team in the world in 2010 and 11. We were still playing 16 championship games then. And all the Blast games with another 50 over comp, which was played by the main team of that county rather than the second team and a bunch of kids. So, and I do get, and I think, and I don't buy the fact that the players want to play less cricket for the same money or if not more. I think they want this sort of, it's their livelihood, and with it being their livelihood, we should be listening to them. And if you get lazy comments, that's fine. They're not bothered about listening to. But the comments of I need to be the best prepared possible to fulfil my skills to keep my job, basically, because that's what county cricket is. County cricket's not right. There's a 5-year contract. Try and look after yourself over the next 5 years. It's a dog-eat-dog world where there's some money. You've got a year. You don't perform, you're gone. Now, that for me, mentally and physically, is something demanding in itself, especially if you've got kids at home. So that's why cricket's such a difficult sport. So having a schedule which looks after players in such a way where it gives them the best chance to fulfill their skills. And if they're not good enough, they're not good enough. See you later, you go and do something else. But because you get one chance as a Durham batter to play two Blast games within 20 hours apart, and you fail and you don't get another go and you get sacked at the end of the season. Wow, that's pretty tough. So I think from a player's point of view, that's all we're asking for. That's all they're asking for. I want the competition to be symmetrical, so it's even. Why can't we play the 50 over competition in the middle of the Blast? You know, have a bigger windows. So instead of having them championship windows in the Blast in the middle of the summer with the Kookaburra, why can't we not tag them on towards the end of in the sort of back end of August and have a white ball, not just Blast. We have a white ball competition, and if we reduce the amount of 50 over games, because nobody goes to watch them and we give them away free anyway, more or less. So have a meaningful competition to go alongside that. Maybe it's a knockout, but something which, yeah, if we're in white ball cricket, we stay in white ball cricket. We're in red ball cricket, we stay in red ball cricket. But for me, we should have a fair contest that both teams play each other. I mean, all teams play each other home and away. And we see where we get to at the end of the season. County members are important. They're very, very important. And I think that's something sometimes gets forgotten about when we are making decisions in ECB towers, because the lifeblood of the game is a county member. What anybody else thinks about that runs ECB and looking after England, because everybody starts at an under 11, under 12, 13, all the way through the county to get to their county. And the people that support them are the ones that come through the gates to watch county cricket. And that I think is still a relevant argument to say that the members of county cricket is important.
Completely agree.
But less cricket means less need for players, doesn't it? So this will come in next
Is that
year.
what the money of the 100's for?
No, but it's
not the money of the 100. We've got a pot of money here. We've sold the 100. All your counties have got your money now, right? So even if we're playing a little bit less cricket, right, we can still have bigger squads because you have got over the course of the next 15 years, if you make sure that you can only spend so much, you should still have an adequate squad to get you through a season, even if you're getting compensated. And it's difficult for a county to be compensated from England, because Matt Potts going off to play for England from Durham. I mean, you still got to replace him, and the money, it doesn't come. It's not like at the start of the year or the end of the year you get like this big pot to go, right, we foresee that Matt Potts is going to be away, so we'll get an extra bowler in. Actually, Durham's a prime example. I think Durham's some of issues this year, and it's a good example. Obviously, I've got one eye on the club. I think some of Durham's problems this year is about too many options. They've signed two batters at the start of the year for one player going out in Borthwick, and signed Gay and Rhodes. And I think sometimes you have too many options, and they could complicate matters. And I think that's, it's happened at Durham this year, and that might have happened in other counties.
I think the opposite is
just to look at it.
I think the opposite is also true, though. Like two things like that. You're losing potentially losing two championship games, two last games. We're not losing a competition here. And B, linked to that, let's not pretend that all the counties are coping with the squads they've currently got. Kent are spending 3-4 months of the season essentially using other people's bowlers. Durham, I think Durham used 11 seamers in April and May, and part of that was because of options, as Harmy says. But options very quickly becomes, we've got no bowlers left, and that is primarily caused by the current schedule that exists. And let's bear in mind, the one thing that everyone does agree on at the moment is that the current schedule does not work. Sussex lost 3 players to injury on the second day of a back-to-back T20 game this weekend just gone. So the problems that everyone knows exist are causing, are very much there. It's not a smokescreen. They are absolutely real issues that cause plenty of injuries, plenty of players to miss out. The loan market is in overdrive. Overseas players are always being replaced with more overseas players. So the idea that counties are currently, have the opposite. What's the opposite of a stretch squad? Like a zillion options that they don't have to touch in the season is not the case. No one, very few teams hit September with the same attack they started April with. So I don't think losing a game or two here and there is going to change the need for players.
Nick, have you seen the second team games this week? I looked in the scorecards yesterday. This is outside of that. I was looking at the scorecards yesterday, and nearly every second team game yesterday. Durham's second team game yesterday. The name the team is ridiculous. It's
but that's only
a lot of teams are like that.
That's only this week because the championship's coming back and you're throwing Red Bull players back in for essentially their first meaningful hit of the last 3 weeks.
Can I ask a question?
If you look at the second team 2 weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
I'm primarily looking at the kids' game. So
can I ask a question? Where you might have mentioned it, you did say something about the start of the summer being slightly different, but where will these 2 games, say it goes from 14 to 12, where will these 2 games be taken from, the county championship? Because as we know, they play a block in April, May, then we got this weird 1 game in June, 2 games in July, and then nothing till September.
Well, they'll start later, won't they?
Is that what they'll do? So it's not.
They'll certainly start later, but I think also if you look at the current schedule for this year, you could even if you move the mid late July blocks of championship games, if you moved them out, if you moved them somewhere else, you could very easily play the entire blast before the 100 starts, which is what they will do going forward, I think. Right. So that's
kind of where I'm going, right? So to deal with this situation, and look, the schedule's crazy, I understand that, and it's not a perfect scenario, but what you're suggesting is that they're going to make the season shorter.
Yes.
But it is shorter anyway because the 100.
Yeah, but they're going to even shorter.
I mean,
they're going to start. Yeah, but to be fair, John, I'm all for going back to the Harmy. I remember what county cricket was like in the 80s and 90s. Okay, when it was chaotic and 120 overs in a day, and there were lots of it didn't create the best teams. And I remember the difference in the early years of this century when with promotion and relegation, 4-day cricket, Colpat players, good overseas players, combination of lots of different things, central contracts, all came together to create some very, very good years. And we shouldn't have tinkered with it. But there we are. And I would love them to get rid of the bloody 100. We're always They've got an impossible situation because they're hamstrung. But the season does start bloody early when you've got practice games happening in March, when you've got the season starting before ground staffs have had the ability to grow proper grass cover on their pitches. You're not giving them a reasonable chance of producing conditions which are going to be replicated anywhere in the world.
Well, we also can't moan about shortness at both ends. If bear in mind, every April everyone says it's ludicrous we're starting the first week of April, and every October everyone says it's ludicrous that we're still playing the championship the last week of September. So we can't have it both ways, and shrink it by week at either end, and also and also be moaning that they're still playing when it's cold in the winter.
No, we can't have it every way. That is absolutely true. I mean, and we got away with it this year, I think. I don't know that there's so much moaning about playing it at the end of the summer, to be fair.
Well, I was going to ask you that question.
Go on.
Wouldn't it be better to play, or what is worse, playing the first week of April or the first week of October? I would say it feels kind of better.
First week of April, temperature-wise. But I would say, I don't know the stats on this, but Nick, you might know better because you've covered county cricket more. And I would say the actual scores first week of April have been very good.
Yeah, best times back.
That's why.
Yeah, because they get the time to work on that first pitch.
Yeah,
but then you're going to get the second and the third and the fourth.
If the over competition might be better off going there.
I think the other challenge with October now is the global schedule. And how much, think of the last couple of years and how early England players have departed for tours abroad, and that is I'm trying to think what franchise comp is in that window at the moment, if any. But
ILT20,
CPL,
is it
ILT 20?
But it will be the Champions League, won't it?
Yeah, there's so that might not be a now issue, but if they're looking to create a schedule for the years to come, they'd be brave to plant that new schedule on a portion of the year that might become quite saturated in the next 2 or 3 years. I don't know if it will. That's just thinking loud.
For what it's worth, as a consumer, I always love it when it comes round, and I'm very lucky these days to get to go and watch England abroad. But for a lot of my life, I'd be counting down the days to the start of a new season. I've loved that it started early.
Well, it often starts in the Easter holidays as well. So that there is it's a bit more palatable, I think, on a lot of levels to start in April. I think the thing that I've been told, like cricket-wise, and Harmy will have a far better idea of this than any of us. People have said before that the dew gets worse so you'd have to start early to factor in the light, but you can't start earlier because the dew's down. So I don't know if cricket-wise that works, and that feels
might be worth finding out though.
Yeah,
it might be worth finding out. And the England touring factor for me shouldn't really come into it because England play in the summer and you lose players anyway. So in the end of the day,
I think England are in Ireland this September, aren't they?
Yeah,
and I think we have had several limited overs games, internationals rained out. Typically,
it was Bristol, wasn't it?
Yeah. Typically as late as September the 29th.
Yeah,
I think. So we have stretched it as much as it will stretch. I think most people would accept that you don't want to go into March and you don't really want to go to October.
We remember the 2019 title decider, right? Somerset Essex, and remember all the fuss about that pitch. It ended up that Somerset felt they had to produce essentially a 2-dayer because the forecast was the forecast for late September, and you don't want the risk of a title decided coming down to the forecast. And of course, you can never rely on that. But you've got
it's a good reason to be a little bit nervous about the talk of finals. Personally, not a massive fan. The talk of finals to a league system, but it's worked in Australia for 100 years. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, can I just jump in? Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know if it necessarily has worked in Australia for 100 years. Even this year, before one of the greatest of all Sheffield Shield finals, I think there was quite a push for it to change. And Mark Taylor came out and said he didn't think it was a good idea. But then it conjured up to be a really good final. Because, of course, you got that weird situation with the toss, didn't you? And, of course, the team that draws, that finishes top, wins the final. So there's been very, very few competitive Sheffield Shield finals over 100 years. Because one team just tries to bat it out, basically. Anyway, yeah, Harmy, go.
There might be an appetite for it after watching the World Test Championship final. There might be where people go, you know what, that was a brilliant spectacle, outlaws, full house, blah, blah, blah. I'm with George. I'm not a big fan of a final. You win. You work so hard to win 14 games, you win the league. Simple as that.
And particularly if it was a top division where you play everyone home and away, then you've absolutely bloody nailed it. No one can say you don't deserve it.
I'd rather you play the game. I'd rather you play the extra game each than play that one-off final.
So this is what happens. You have these conversations, and we've just agreed that ideally we go for that model, which is the Surrey model. But then we've also kind of agreed that it would be really harsh to take away the T20 games from the non-100 host counties. And you see the problem. We've just we end up with almost the same amount of cricket. You cut in 2 days. Is that enough? Look, I hope it's what they go for. I always love the maximum amount of cricket possible. But to have all this conversation, all this review and cut 40 overs, I mean, it's not a lot, is it?
The problem you've got is we've always had a 6-month competition. And for the last 3 years, the 6-month competition's at fit in 5. Doesn't work.
So we've agreed. Let's get rid of the 100.
Why don't we just play the 100 in October in somewhere else?
I think the one thing I would do if there was a final, and I think this is what they do in Australia, and it seems likely that two of the 3 main options feature a final, and probably the 2 likeliest options in reality. I think the important thing, and as much as the World Championship final last week was great, I think it only works if you follow the Aussie model in that the winning team hosts the top team hosts the final. There has to be an advantage of some description for winning, as you said, a 6-month-long 12 or 14 game competition. And it's not. If we go back to the Bob Willis final in 21, I want to say the year before the year they retired it, when Lancs played Warwickshire at Lords, Lancashire lost the toss. I can't remember who won 2020. I can't remember what year it was. But point being, Lancs got put in at Lords and was something like 20 for 6, and the game was done the first morning. And I think if you're going to win the tournament, at the very least, you need the advantage of playing the final at home, which also then means that it's not played in front of an empty stadium. Can you imagine if Somerset came out on top of the championship and then had a home final at Taunton? You'd have 4 days at a full ground, and it'd be a proper spectacle. I don't think you could do that. I don't think you could do all that work and have to go to some neutral ground that might not suit you at all, having finished 60 points clear of second place.
September final, it'll be freezing. And it would be non-event. Dingy and non-event.
To be really radical, though, there's been talk over the years about playing a couple of rounds of the championship abroad. You could.
Charity Shield.
All this money, you could play the whole 100 abroad in October and make sure that it was given to free-to-air TV, so it was really accessible to everybody.
Where?
I mean, what do you mean? You could do it in October?
No, I'm just saying, what countries? There's only really 2 countries, wouldn't there? UAE and
there's
South Africa.
Well, you could play it in. Well, I mean, you could play it in Barbados. I mean, you could play it in. You could probably play it in Spain, but you could definitely play.
I mean, you could play it on the moon, but they're not going to.
No, they're probably not going to. But how did we get to this situation? It's not that much more outlandish than saying, I know, we'll have a completely different situation. We'll stop calling it overs. We'll have sets. We'll only use half the counties. We'll take the whole of August. We'll sell it to whoever wants to buy it. I mean, it's not that much more outlandish.
Well, look, when Richard Gould and team invited us along to Lords to talk about all this, George, that was the question I asked, wasn't it? Could the 100 be played overseas? I mean, I wasn't saying the whole tournament.
I think you meant one game, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. But absolutely, I could see it being played abroad. Not the whole thing, but I could definitely see it being.
But yeah, it's not one of these things we're talking about at the moment. Hey, I got to go. I really have.
That's fine. You get out of here. I'll see you ahead.
Nice to see you all looking so young and so well.
See you all Friday.
Oh, yeah. Well, apart from Nick, who'll be on the county beat.